Welcome chamber music fans, Michelle Schumann here with the Austin Chamber Music Festival, and I'm so happy to introduce you Missy Mazzioli, who is the composer and band leader for Victoire. They're going to be one of our bands ensembles during the Austin Chamber Music Festival this summer, and I'm happy to say that this is the first interview that I'm doing. This is part of our annual festival focus that we do every year. So this is the first video, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be the first video that we post as well. So thanks for being with us, Missy.
Thanks for having me.
For those of you who don't know, I've known Missy for, I guess, 10 years. We haven't kept in great touch, but we had such a good time meeting that first time because we were roommates at the Bang on a Can Festival Institute at Mass MoCA. And it's affectionately known as Banglewood because it's just down the road from Tanglewood. And for me, it was a really transformative experience, and it was totally fun to be your your roommate too. But after that, you went on to do a Fulbright in Amsterdam. And I was just sort of curious as to how that kind of shaped your compositional style, and if that made a big impact on you.
Absolutely. I mean, that decision to study abroad really changed my entire life. I worked with the Dutch composer Louis Andriessen and lived in Amsterdam and in The Hague for 2 years. And I felt like I was in the middle of everything. I mean, I felt like I was exposed to everything that young composers in Europe were doing. And there were composers there from all over the world, a lot of people from South America, England, Russia. I mean, it was just, I felt like I had this unique perspective on what young people were doing in the world, and also had this perspective on America that was really interesting. I mean, they would say things to me like, well, you're really isolated over there in America. And I would say like, no, we're not. And then I would think about it and realize that, yes, we are. Yeah. You know, we're like, compared to what's going on in Europe, when you have access to all these different scenes and communities, we are sort of in our own little world, especially in New York. So, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it was really interesting to look at it that way.
Well, and I think compositionally too, a lot of times in the United States, there's this habit of everyone goes through the same sort of routine to get to where they need to be. They go to university or conservatory and they get graduate degrees, and then they get an academic job, and then that sort of carves out their entire compositional life. And I remember at the time you had gotten accepted to Juilliard, and it was I think it was a little bit of a, I don't know if it was a risk, but you weren't sure exactly what to do, and then you made up your mind, and it probably will change who you are. Obviously, it'll change who you are for the rest of your life. But I do find that there can be a habit here that it's almost a little bit too easy to decide that you want to become a composer, and then you go through all those sort of steps that it takes to become a composer. Whereas I think what you did was, it was kind of risky in a way, but it really allowed you to expose you to these different ideas that you might not have had exposure to otherwise.
Absolutely. It's so funny that you remember that, all that drama. I'm sure I probably talked your ear off about all these like decisions I'm trying to make. Because I was like 21 at the time, and I think it's a hard thing for anyone, whether you're a composer or not, but you have to make these decisions when you're, 17, 18, 19, 20, and you're totally uninformed, yet they do totally shape who you are. Yeah. So it's like I knew that whatever decision I make would take me in two totally different directions, would totally shape who I am, but I had no idea which one was the better thing to do. Yeah. And in retrospect, I really made the right decision, and that I feel like studying in Amsterdam was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And as you get older, it's harder to leave. Like I feel like I could never leave New York now. I'm just so weird here. But at 21, it was just totally the thing to do. Yeah. And it was risky, but it didn't feel like a risk at the time. I felt like if I don't do this now, I'm really going to regret this for the rest of my life. So this is what I tell my students too. I'm like, if you have the opportunity to get a perspective on what's going on in America and just meet new people, go do it. That has to be a priority.
Yeah, I always encourage even young musicians. Sometimes I get people asking me, or kids and their parents asking me, if it's the right thing to do to go into music. Their child is passionate about it, or the student is really passionate about it, and they're not completely sure if it's the right thing to do, or maybe they should do a double major in like music and business or something practical. And I always say that it's really important to do, like, to just follow your passion while you're young, because, you know, there's time. We actually have time. Like, if it ends up being the quote-unquote wrong decision, there's enough time to sort of recoup that and do something else if you want to. But you kind of have to follow your musical dreams, your artistic dreams first, and the most radical dreams, I think, first, to see how that'll work out. So, I mean, I think it's really cool that you did it, and I was really excited when your band came on the scene, Victoire. Can you tell me a little bit how that came about? I was thrilled when I was kind of looking you up recently, and we had talked about you coming to the festival last year and didn't quite work out. But your band has done amazing things. You must have been really happy with the first CD that came out. They got such great reviews. I think New York Times and the New Yorker, they all said it was like one of the top 10 classical albums of the year, which is actually unbelievable to get that kind of recognition. So you must have felt so great about that. But how did this band come around?
Yeah, well, I started Victoire in 2008, and with the idea that, I mean, I really didn't have this idea of what was going to happen at the time. I just knew that I needed a performing outlet, because I'm also a pianist, and I knew that I wanted a group that could perform anywhere and do anything. You know, because as a composer, you're so at the whim of performers. You know, it's like you write all this music, but then they get to decide when it happens and where it happens and what it looks like and how they dress. And it's like so much of that is just out of your control, which is fine sometimes, but I really wanted an aspect of my output that I could control a little more. And I wanted to I had all these musicians actually that I met through the Bang in a Can summer program over the years. So I would go back after our first year there. I would go back every year and go to the marathon and meet people, and met all these fantastic people. And I thought, well, this just seems like such a natural group. And actually, everyone who joined the group in 2008 is still with the group. It's like all the original members moved all over the world, and we played in concert halls. You know, we're actually doing a show at Carnegie Hall next year. But we also played on tour with like indie rock bands and in bars and in art galleries and outside. I mean, it really can exist anywhere.
Well, that's what I love about bringing you guys to Austin, because I think you guys are the perfect band for Austin, because Austin really has this great scene of like combining classical musicians with more popular styles, but in this sort of classical indie chamber way. So I think you're really going to enjoy the scene here, and I think a lot of people are going to come out to be able to support you guys too. So it's really, it's kind of thrilling to kind of put that together. I know that I don't think I have a chip on my shoulder, but it always feels like everything happens in New York, but things happen elsewhere too. And Austin has a really cool scene in that way, and I think you guys are just going to really enjoy yourselves while you're here.
And we're really looking forward to it.
And talk a little bit about your compositional style, or maybe your process, especially when it comes to the band. Like, how do you compose pieces, and how is it a collaborative idea at all, or how does that work?
Sure. Well, it's I think that anytime you have a band with your friends, it's going to be collaborative, and it's never the case that I just hand them a piece and 100% of the music is there, and then they just perform it. It's always some give and take. And actually, recently, some of the more recent works we've been doing are even a little more collaborative, in that I'm working mostly with the other keyboardist, Lorna Creer. She's a sort of like electronic music wizard, and so I'll come up with a general idea of what the electronic component should be, and then she realizes it. And she did a remix of a piece that I originally wrote for cello and electronics, and we did a remix together that for the band. So things like that are more collaborative. But I think that it's still very much my sort of compositional voice and driving the whole thing.
And is it traditional in the way that, do you have a score for each of the pieces, or is some of it improvised?
Yes, all of the above. It's mostly written out, and it's the thing that people always ask me is, how is the music that you write for your band different from the music that you would write for a string quartet or an orchestra? And there really is no difference. I mean, I think that obviously the instrumentation is different, so that changes a lot of stuff. And obviously we sort of function in a band model, so that changes everything. And how we relate to the audience is a little different from how a string quartet would relate to an audience.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, when I started the group, I modeled it. I wanted the best of the classical world and the best of the band rock world, because I had all these friends who were touring with these rock bands, and there were a lot of aspects of that I really liked. I mean, I loved that things felt really fresh and alive in the performance, that they would talk to the audience, and it was a very spontaneous way of working. I liked that, again, they could play anywhere, and it was this paradigm that the audience would understand. It's like if you can say you're a composer and everyone's like doesn't quite know what that means. But if you say you're in a band, they know exactly what you're going to get. It's like you're going to stand in front of me and play your music. It's like, yes, that's what's going to happen. So I loved that sort of barrier wasn't there, where I think with a lot of new music, people just aren't sure what that means. And it can mean so many different things right now in 2013 that you're up against a lot when it comes to relating to an audience. But that said,
and a lot of times people are fearful of that, and audiences, they have this sort of inherent fear before they've even heard anything come out, and that can be kind of frustrating as a performer too.
Exactly. And when what you're playing is maybe very accessible, but people, even myself included, like you come to these concerts with a lot of baggage and a lot of sometimes even like resistance. So I think by presenting the group as a band, we sort of can knock some of that resistance down. But we still, we're all classically trained musicians. I mean, our bass player Eleanor was playing with the Philip Glass Ensemble for a while. Excuse me. Our violinist is in the Mibos String Quartet, which is playing all over the world. Everyone has these sort of very classical outlets, and they can read and play anything. So that's what I wanted from the classical world, is I wanted that sort of virtuosity and commitment to detail that you get when you're playing with a chamber ensemble. So yeah, I really think for me it's been the best of all possible worlds.
Yeah, that's really great. And how much did the other ensembles that have been around that have sort of paved the way, like the Philip Glass Ensemble, Steve Reich Ensemble, and Bang on a Can All-Stars, they must have had a big impact on you as well, to know that you could actually do something like that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in particular, the Philip Glass Ensemble and Bang on a Can. I would also say the Meredith Monk Vocal Ensemble. Because the Glass Ensemble and Meredith Monk's Ensemble, they're these composer-driven groups that are very flexible, and they have a sound to them. And I think my other problem with a lot of contemporary ensembles was that you couldn't easily identify a sound. And with a band, you can hear two chords played by U2, and you know that's U2 or whatever.
Right.
And I felt that with Philip Glass and Meredith Monk, you do get that. And just looking at the way they work as a business model too is very inspiring for me. And so, and they've also, I know them both, Philip and Meredith, and I feel like they've been very, very supportive and sort of told me some of their secrets in how they started their group, and it changed everything for me.
Yeah, it's so great because, again, it feels like sometimes for composers there's not that many possibilities, and so I think the model of having your own group composing and performing your own music is it seems like such a fulfilling way of doing it. And really ingenious, and again, you're right, it's not any different than sort of what rock bands do. They compose pieces, they compose songs, and then they perform them, and I just think it's taking ownership of your work in a way that is really, I think, a really important thing to do, I think, in our climate too.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think it's important to have lots of different outlets as a composer, especially in today's crazy economy. I mean, like I teach, I have a residency at the Opera Company of Philadelphia, I have commissions, and I have this band, and any one of those things would not quite be enough to satisfy me as a musician, but altogether it sort of creates this life for me.
Well, speaking of you being a teacher, I'm really excited because you're going to be working with some of our workshop students, and we have probably during the summer we have 50 to 60 different chamber musicians, young chamber musicians, and we put them into composition classes. So that's a pretty important part of what they do, composition and improvisation classes. So I'm excited for you to be able to work with them because I think they do. I know that the composition teachers, and you might do, I think you know Graham Reynolds, or you've met Graham Reynolds at some point, maybe in New York or something. And he heads up a lot of the composition classes that we do here in Austin. And it's very much that model of combining classical music, or I guess contemporary classical music, with more popular styles, and really trying to find your own voice. And then also being able to perform your own music or create a band or a group that can do that. So I think it's going to be really amenable to your style a lot.
I'm looking forward to it. It'll be great.
And I also remember, I mean, one of the things that at Bang On Can that was really interesting to me was the whole gamelan thing. And I know that you had done a lot of gamelan before you got there too. And I was doing gamelan for the first time, and I remember so clearly you teaching me the little rhythms in our room. It was really, so I don't actually remember you kvetching about like, what am I going to do? I actually remember you teaching me like all these awesome gamelan things.
Oh, cool.
But did that have an important impact on your composition as well?
Oh, yeah. In a million ways. Yeah, I mean, I played in the gamelan at MIT when I was an undergrad at Boston University. So I was in that group that was run by Evan Zaporin for 2 years. And it really, at that point, I mean, I was 19 when I joined the group. I was very young, and it just really, again, was a formidable experience for me. And I think just the Balinese music does all these things that Western classical music just doesn't do. I mean, really simple things like we're going to start slow and get really, really, really fast, you know. And sure, we have like subtle accelerandos and retardandos, but we don't have anything that extreme, anything as extreme as Balinese music. And also just the way that the instruments are made in pairs and that they have these rhythms that interlock. Again, that's just something that doesn't happen in Western music, but it's a very simple idea. So I have been experimenting over the years with bringing that into my own work, which has been really cool.
Yeah, great. Well, I can't wait. And are you guys recording now? Are you recording a new album now?
We are slowly recording our new album, and we're collaborating with the percussionist Glenn Kochi, who plays in Wilco. And we're doing this big piece together at Carnegie Hall. So that will form the bulk of our next album, which will be hopefully released at the end of 2014, next year.
Yeah, that's exciting. We'll have to have you guys come back after you get that done.
We'd love that. I know he loves Austin too. He's always talking about it. So
he's been to Austin several times. I think so. Yeah. Well, good. Well, it's been great catching up with you, Missy.
Yeah, great to talk to you.
Yeah, and I can't wait to have you guys. I know that Austin's going to love Victoire. Now, how do you say? I say Victoire. Is that the right way to say it?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, Victoire.
People ask me, so I want to make sure that I'm the authority on it.
It's funny. Yeah, we have horrible French accents. So we played in Paris, and we were like, Victoire.
Yeah, well, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and so really looking forward to it. Thanks for meeting with us all.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, take it easy.
Okay, bye.
Bye.